Good morning, members. Can I begin by welcoming you all to this morning's committee meeting? Could I advise members, please, of the need to maintain social distancing during the meeting and provide a brief overview of today's business? The committee today will consider subordinate legislation, including a briefing on draft Railway Safety Management Amendment EU Exit Regulations, Departmental briefing on Road Safety Strategy, Biennial MOT testing and CLG report on strengthening committee scrutiny. Could I advise members also that the room must be vacated by 1 p.m. at the latest, and advise members to keep that in mind when asking questions. Today's apologies, we have two that I'm aware of, George Robinson MLA and our Vice Chair David Hilditch. Do I have any other apologies?
Sure. Apologies, just run 10 or 15 minutes late, but he'll be in the meeting.
Patrick will be along.
Sure.
Yes, Liz?
You're just to say that I have to be in the chamber of theatre sitting today, so I may have to leave about 11:30.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, so I'm very much conscious that the chamber's sitting today, so I want to keep the businesses focused and try to get through this as quickly as we can. If members could bear with me on that, and we'll certainly try our best. Okay, agenda item number 2, Chairperson's business. I have none. I turn now to draft minutes at page 6. Draft minutes of the meeting on the 16th of February. Are members content that they're an accurate reflection of the meeting? Agreed?
Agreed.
Great, thank you, members. Agenda item number 4, which is matters arising at page 18, matters arising from the meeting on the 16th of February 2022. Could I ask members if they have any issues arising from the meeting? Members have none. At page 22, outstanding committee requests for information for noting. And now take members on to agenda item number 5, which is correspondence, and I'll draw members' attention to page 34 of your pack, which is the correspondence memo. You'll see them there. There is 4. It's lighter today. All for noting, and 1 for forwarding on. Members are content with the actions as suggested in the correspondence memo. Agreed? Members will also see tabled at page 4, which is a letter that I had received as chair from Drainage for Development. I'm particularly concerned about this one, members, because obviously given the briefing that we had last week and this committee's attention to the difficulties facing the planning system, I think it would be timely and beneficial if we organise a briefing session with Drainage for Development, which is a representative organisation of many of the large-scale developers within Northern Ireland, to find out the experiences that they have of the planning system to date and the difficulties right across Northern Ireland. Are members content that we organise that for a briefing? I think it'd be quite useful. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you, members. We now move to agenda item number 6, which is SL1, the Biennial Bangor Amendment. Do you want as a Bangorian? Do you want Fennel? The Fennel Bangor Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2022. At page 70, the SL1, the proposal is subject to negative resolution procedure. The rule will abandon 2 areas totalling 506 square metres at the Biennial Bangor at its junction with South Well Road and its junction with Queen's Parade. The department was consulted on the proposal and there was 1 objection. The department advises that it is fully satisfied that the issues raised by the objector have been fully addressed. I have no sight of that objection. Has anybody any particular questions pertaining to it? Or Andrew, I know local.
Yeah, I'm happy to support it. I think this relates back to the wider plan application, which the department have been sitting on it for 13 months. So it's important that whilst the department's bringing this forward, they also progress the other issue.
Absolutely, and I'm more than keen to progress and continue on with that update that we've been seeking on that. I think it's a very important one. So are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule? Content. Thank you, members. We now move to agenda item number 7, which is the Four-Glen Road, Dungiven Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2022. Page 75, the SL1. The proposal is subject to negative resolution procedure. The rule will abandon an area of road and verge from the eastern junction of the Four-Glen Road, of the A6 Four-Glen Road and U2203 Four-Glen Road, Dungiven, extending westward for a distance of 92 metres. The department has consulted on the proposal and there has been no objections. Are members content with the statutory rule? Content. Agenda item number 8, which is SR 2022-41, the Century Street Belfast Footway Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2022. At page 80 of your pack is the statutory rule. The committee considered the proposal for the rule on the 2nd of February 2022 and was content The rule is subject to negative resolution. There has been no change to the policy content of the SR since the SL1 was considered by the committee. Are members content with this rule? Content. Okay, members, and I now read that the Committee for Infrastructure has considered SR 2022-41, the Century Street Belfast Footway Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2022, and subject to the Examiner of Statutory Rules report, has no objections to the rule. Members. Agenda item number 9, which is SR 2022-44, the Bus Operators Coronavirus Financial Assistance Regulation, Northern Ireland 2022, at page 88 of your pack. Can I say before I do read, I welcome very much this SR. It's something that this committee very much pushed on during its time, in particular with the difficulties that they faced even recently. We know that the bus operators will be a particular sector that's going to face a long lag following COVID-19, and I do very much welcome that the department have brought this forward. I welcome that the minister has brought it forward, and certainly I hope it goes a long way in helping those that are in most need. The committee considered the proposal for the rule on the 2nd of February 2022 and was content. The rule is subject to negative resolution. There has been no change of the policy content of the SR since the SL1 was considered by the committee. Are members content with this rule?
Content.
Okay, members, I now read that the Committee for Infrastructure has considered SR 2022-44, the Bus Operators Coronavirus Financial Assistance Regulations, Northern Ireland 2022, and subject to the Examiner of Statutory Rules report, has no objection to the rule. Agreed. Okay, members, just a wee change round in the agenda. I'm going to move firstly to agenda item number 11 for a briefing, and that is department briefing on the railway, our draft Railway Safety Management Amendment, EU Exit Regulations, Northern Ireland 20922, pages 113 and 127. You'll see the department briefing paper and indeed the SR. And I'm going to welcome and give them time to get a drop of water and get themselves settled, but I'm going to welcome to the committee attending in person Mr. Graham Banks, acting head of Rail Safety Branch, and Mr. Anthony McDaid, EU Exit Legislation and Rail Safety. Gentlemen, you're both very welcome to committee this morning, and I will hand over to you for a brief. Please take your time, have a drink and settle yourselves before you start.
A drink?
A stiff drink.
Chair, committee members, thanks for the opportunity to provide you with an update on the Department's proposed Railway Safety Management Amendment, EU Exit Regulations, Northern Ireland 2022. As you mentioned, I'm Dr. Graham Banks, the Acting Head of Rail Safety for the Department for Infrastructure. I'm joined by my colleague Anthony McDaid. We're here to provide an update on the recent consultation on the proposed regulations and give you an opportunity to ask some questions that will hopefully assist in consideration of the SL1. The proposed regulations are a set of amending regulations to amend the Railway Safety Management Regulations 2006. Under the 2006 regulations, all mainline operators such as TransLink or Irish Rail cannot operate on the NI network unless they have been awarded the necessary safety certification by the Department Safety Authority. These requirements only apply to railway undertakings operating on the mainline network. They don't apply to heritage railway operators. They are exempt from the requirements to hold a safety certificate. Rather, heritage operators are required to submit a risk assessment to the Department for their operations. At present, mainline operators must hold both a Part A and Part B safety certificate. And applying for a Part A and Part B certificate, there's quite a degree of duplication in the information which is required to be submitted to the Safety Authority. The proposed draft regulations replace this two-part system with a new single safety certificate, which is intended to streamline the safety certification process and reduce or remove duplication, and hopefully it will be less burdensome on TransLink, Railways and Irish Rail. If the regulations are made, the current Part A and Part B safety certificates will remain in place until they expire in 2023, at which time the single safety certificate arrangements set out in the proposed regulations will then apply. The Department's 12-week consultation on the proposed regulations completed on the 3rd of February, and a total of 6 responses were received, including from TransLink and Irish Rail. The responses received indicate that consultees were generally content with the proposal to move to a new single safety certification process. There was no significant changes to the policy following the consultation. However, consultation respondents pointed out a few helpful technical suggestions which tightened up the regulations which have been put before you today. There were a few comments seeking clarification on a few areas, and we've taken legal advice on the best way to deal with that. And we feel that through guidance, rather than additional amendments within the regulations, is the best way to proceed there. I hope this brief overview is helpful, and the pack that you've received gives you the information you need. We're happy to take any questions that committee members may have.
Thank you, Graham. Suppose firstly, for context, is the retained EU law in relation to this aspect NI specific, or is it right across the United Kingdom at present?
It's it applies. It's been retained across the UK. It was retained in GB to help with the Channel Tunnel and arrangements that are being put in place in the Channel Tunnel. There are some different amendments in GB compared to what we're proposing here, and that's simply to deal with interoperability, which is listed as an item under the protocol. So we can't amend aspects which relate to technical standards in GB. However, because the protocol doesn't apply there, they don't have to make the same amendments. They're making some slightly different amendments because they will have different technical standards going forward.
Okay. Now go to members for Biggs.
This is real safety legislation, and I've noted some very disturbing comments in the feedback from real users, organisations. TransLink, for instance, have highlighted this is the 5th amendment to the original 2006 regulations, and it's making it challenging to follow. So we're creating safety regulations that are challenging to follow. That is not a good sign. But even more than that, and I'm trying to bring it up on the screen, there were some other comments that had come in of a wider nature from the Department of Transport. For instance, saying that it may be worthwhile making issues clearer in guidance. So they're have raised concern. Let me see. I'm trying to think. There's also a comment that they were established. They operate under a directive. I should have printed this out. This is difficult online. There's a comment from the Department of Transport. It would make sense to revoke Regulation 19 and rail safety amendments, etc. So there's, there are a lot of failures around this area when I read this, and confusing. And another comment: to avoid confusion, we would like to request the removal of proposed Regulation 5 Part 9 and propose amendments to Regulation 16. If any amendments are considered necessary, for example, Regulation 16 refers to issues, amendments or revocation, so renewal could be added to Regulation 16 if required. So it seems to me there are a lot of complications and failures in what is meant to be safety regulations. Another comment I noticed here from TransLink: the regulations would benefit from a complete new issue. That's the issue of being the 5th. And all we're getting from the department is we will look at it and we will consider. We intend. I mean, okay. I'm very concerned that you are getting very critical comments and there's no definite way forward. Okay,
vast number of points in, I'll take them as best I can in turn. So, let me see. TransLink, yes, they did express concern. This was the 5th amendment to these sets of regulations. The Department would have preferred to bring forward a consolidated set of regulations which would have clarified all these issues. However, there was limited time left in the current mandate in order to be able to implement this process. And it's something we're looking to do to give us sufficient enough time within the new mandate to develop new processes for the application and issue of the single safety certificate. So that was why we decided to proceed with amending the existing regulations rather than trying to bring forward a consolidated set. It's unlikely that we would have been able to do that with current resources within this mandate. In order to address the confusion, the Department proposes to publish a Keeling schedule, which will, in effect, give a single set of regulations highlighting all the amendments and what currently applies to each of the aspects, whether it's on safety authorisation, safety certificates, safety performance reporting, or whatever aspect within the amended set of regulations, and hopefully make it, through doing that, making it clearer for TransLink to be able to follow. There's a few other comments there in relation to Regulation 5.9. You'll see from, if you compare the initial set that we provided on the 10th of November, prior to the consultation period started, there was an Amendment 5.9, which related to the renewal, further safety certificates, amendment of existing certificates. We have removed that and have accepted the point made by ORR in relation to amending Regulation 16 to clarify that issue. I'm trying to think, there was another point there.
761.
Yep. In terms of the proposal to revoke Regulation 19 in a previous set of EU exit amendment regulations, we've accepted that and we've added that to the regulations as well.
What I'm looking for is, or what I'm listening is, that there's limited time and you're having to rush this through. Can you convince me that things become safer by putting this through, rather than perhaps even adding to complications?
This amendment's not about, it's about changing the safety certification process. It's not about the actual practice of safety management on the network. It's about the safety certification process and streamlining that process to remove and reduce duplication in the process, so that when TransLink and Irish Rail apply for their new safety certification next year, that process is less burdensome for them, so that they're not having to supply the same information that they would in a Part A, that they would then have to supply again in a Part B. Again,
I've just picked up this concern about the complexity that is there, and when there is complexity, there obviously can be failings. But yet, from the department, I'm seeing no definite commitment that the policies will be, or the regulations will be redrafted, rewrote in the long term. I'm saying we hope. I'm seeing aspirational comments, and I would want to see something more than that.
It is in our work programme for the next mandate to bring forward a consolidated set of regulations.
That's encouraging. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go to Liz Kimmins, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the introduction there to the briefing. I know I've raised this in a previous meeting, but I was concerned that Target 1 is a wee bit less ambitious than in this draft strategy than the 2020 strategy, which aimed to reduce the number of people killed in road collisions by 60%. Now it's proposed to be 50%. And it's recognised that the consultation states that the UN and the WHO global plan for the decade of road safety includes targets of preventing at least 50% of road traffic deaths and injuries by 2030. So again, I just wanted to state that,
I think maybe that's because I did explain, you might have missed this. We're taking a different briefing at the moment. We've reversed the order.
Sorry. Apologies, sorry, Chair.
Don't worry. This is on. I seen Graham was reaching for a stiff drink there. So, I can come back to you.
I had to go in. I
can come back to you. I'll go to Cahill Boylan on the draft railway safety management.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Liz, you can go back in the end. Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much for it. And Graham, to be honest, I mean, and I appreciate what Mr. Beggs was saying. So what you're saying is, this is about this certificate, right? Process, right? I can't, to be honest with you, I can't understand why there was a Part A, and it seems, it seems complicated, and what was the rationale behind having a Part A and a Part B?
That relates to the fact that this goes back to when the UK was a member of the European Union, and you would have operators operating in different jurisdictions, so they would apply within their own jurisdiction for a Part A certificate. So that would that's for the safety management system, registers the operations within that member state, but for the European Union, and then in another jurisdiction they would only have to apply for a Part B. So as we're no longer a member of the European Union,
it's going to be less burdensome and less complex.
That's it.
And then the point, and I know it's following on from what Raya said, we're not dealing with the regulations just yet, it's coming forward.
That's,
So there were no
that's absolutely
immunisation of
intention.
regulation
Yeah.
itself, yeah?
Yeah.
And just another point, I see Irish Rail had no concerns, but I mean, what discussions has there been with the government in the South or Irish Rail or?
We have had some discussions with Irish Rail, or I suppose it's to reassure them that even although we're not an EU member state anymore, our regulatory framework is evolving in a way which we're trying to reduce and remove duplication to make sure that the processes are going to be streamlined, that we're not adding complexity when we don't need to, that we're removing that, and essentially reassuring them that there will be early engagement as we change the process prior to the application process, so that they'll be clear on the expectations of the department in terms of what they need to submit, because it will be different from the last time, but doing it in a way, working with stakeholders, with Irish Rail and with TransLink as well, of course, to put them at ease that this really is about simplifying the process, so to make it easier for them to submit the information that we require to certify them.
And that's part of the new discussions, the new regulations coming forward, the way you want to do it coming forward, yeah?
Well, no, that's within the current regulations, so that sets out the framework, but in terms of the actual processes and how things will look specifically, that will, some of that will be captured in guidance, but I suppose guidance is one thing, but it's like you say, that early engagement actually with them prior to the process, make sure that these things work an awful lot more smoothly than if you're putting something on paper or you publish it on a website and then there's no engagement. So it's all about engaging with the stakeholders to make sure that the processes are well understood, so that they know what information that they need to supply. I mean, in terms of the information itself, it's not radically different. It's just, it really is about removing where they would be saying in one system, well, here's our safety management system, and then here's the bit of the safety management system, and this is how it applies to this part of the network, or operations in Northern Ireland, or whatever. It's really about saying, well, that's the safety management system, and this links to this, and this links to this. It's all about making it much more streamlined, so that it's easier for everybody to engage in the process.
And that's the thing, like I understand Roy's point, because it's a change. No matter how we look at it, it's still a changing process.
Yeah.
So it's important to have those people in the room at the very start of the process. That's
Absolutely.
And the point that Mr. Begg made about, this has been the fifth amendment to the original set regulations. As Graham pointed out, our intention is in the next mandate to bring together one new set of safety management regulations rather than having to refer back to multiple amendments. So that then hopefully again will make it.
Fair enough, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mentioned earlier, Graham, and I appreciate maybe you don't have this on hand, but obviously you talked about this being UK retained EU law, but yet the application different in Northern Ireland as a result of the protocol. Do you have specifics as to what the differential will be?
I don't, because I don't have the specific changes that they want to make in GB. Yeah. But I do know that where, for instance, in the retained, 2018-762, which relates to the safety certificate itself, and retained regulation 2018-763, which is the application process, that within that, where it refers to a technical standard for interoperability, they apply in Northern Ireland. Because of the protocol, they don't apply in GB. In GB, it will be amended to the National Technical Specification Notice and the amendments that have been made to the Rail Interoperability Regulations 2011.
Okay. And just any information that you can forward on to the committee would be useful, particularly in its application and in relation to the protocol, particularly for this aspect for me. Okay. Okay, I have no other individual indicating that they wish to ask a question. So with that, thank you, gentlemen, for coming this morning to speak with the committee. Okay, members, we're going to move now into agenda item number 10. I'll bring you in first on this one, Liz. This is the departmental briefing on road safety strategy. We'll wait to officials to come to the room, but members will see the briefing paper at page 104 of your pack.
Mr. Chairman, could I declare an interest as a member of the Carrickfergus Road Safety Committee?
Yes, noted, thank you.
Was there an accident? I don't know.
Morning. Please take your time and make yourselves comfortable before we move to the briefing. I can see you, so don't worry.
That's all right.
Thank you. The monitor. Okay, can I begin by welcoming to the committee this morning, attending in person, Dr. Chris Hughes, Director of Safe and Accessible Travel, and Ms. Caroline Hobson, Principal Officer, Safe and Accessible Travel Division. You're both very welcome to the committee this morning, and we look forward to what you have to say. If you want to begin, you can give us your briefing, followed by questions.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity, members. Glad to be here to provide a briefing. So, on the road safety strategy, we last briefed the committee on the 29th of September, which was in advance of us launching a consultation. The consultation document was launched after that and closed on the 10th of January. So this is now an opportunity for us. We have looked at analysing the results of the consultation, and we're preparing a report on it, which will be published. We're also in parallel preparing the final draft road safety strategy for the Minister to consider. So at this point, we're drawing on that consultation, and this is an opportunity for us to, as you had requested, Chair, to update the committee on the outcome of the consultation, and also to provide an opportunity for members to provide input and comment in advance of us providing a final draft to the Minister for consideration. So if you're content, Chair, I'll just ask Caroline to draw out a few of the key points from the consultation in the briefing document.
Thank you. So we'll just sort of touch on the key areas of the consultation and just give a general overview of the responses to that. In terms of the strategic approach then for the strategy, there was a very high percentage in favour of that, 95%, and in favour of the application of the safe system approach, which really provides a holistic approach to road safety going forward. In terms of the target then, again, we had a majority support for the targets that were proposed in the consultation document. Now, specifically around one of the targets, the target one was a proposed 50% reduction in the number of people who were killed. There was some comment raised that that was less ambitious than the previous target of 60%, which is in the 2020 strategy. And some other comments reflected maybe perhaps the wording of the target should be updated to reflect that what's in the UN and the Stockholm Declarations. In terms of then the strategic outcomes, so we've consulted on 3 strategic outcomes: safe roads, safe people, safe vehicles. And again, there was a high level of support for the strategic outcomes that we had identified, and the actions, indeed, for example, the review of the highway code and introduction of GDL, among others. There was some comments around further challenges maybe that should be reflected in the strategy, one being road maintenance delays, and some other high-level actions that had been identified around mainly enforcement, the whole importance of partnership delivery, and also then the infrastructure and the need to have better designed roads. Governance processes then again there was a high level of support for the establishment of a road safety forum and for it to be chaired at the ministerial level. Also a high level of support for the development of local level stakeholder forums and the need for effective partnership working relationships. And then in terms of drawing from that, then the key issues then that we have identified for consideration going forward. So again, infrastructure, I've touched on that, it's the need to invest in the quality, maintenance and design of our roads and address particular delays in road maintenance. The whole area of active and sustainable travel, to develop infrastructure to facilitate and encourage a cultural change, and this should be supported by a workable public transport policy. Education, again, it came across very, very strongly. The need to be both from a young age to instill behavioural change, but also throughout the whole population level, really to keep pace with technological changes that we foresee coming over the lifetime of the strategy, and indeed any changes to legislation, and ensure that they're actually communicated and people are educated and are aware of them. Communication then was another area, the need for strong communication and awareness to try and inform behavioural change and address road safety issues. Partnership working, again, there was a strong need for strong collaborative partnership working to deliver on the outcomes and ensure that our road safety messages are consistent to avoid duplication of effort and indeed to provide value for money. Rural roads, again, was another area, and it was specifically to address the regional imbalance in the investment of rural roads and infrastructure. Again, specific issues sort of touched on the lack of driver awareness in rural areas, the poor maintenance, less visible enforcement, and the need for rural areas to have more safe walking and cycling infrastructure, and also a deal with the lack of public transport provision to allow this the encouragement in active and sustainable travel. Finally, funding. So that was again identified as a key issue, across all of the outcomes, and as it to enable us to allow to deliver the strategy, we need to have the appropriate funding in place. So, as Chris has touched on, we are analysing the responses, the plan being that we will prepare a report, an outcome report for the Minister, along with the final strategy and action plan for her consideration. So really today we're very keen to hear your views and see if there's any further input in terms of the final strategy when we're drafting it that we can include.
Okay. Thank you both very much, and I'll go straight into questions. I'm sure members will have them. So firstly for myself, I suppose, has the department been reviewing the introduction of the new GB Highway Code and any lessons that could be learnt from that process for the development of a new highway code in Northern Ireland, or will the Northern Ireland Highway Code mirror that which has been already developed in GB? And if it is mirrored, is there any real point in spending a lot of time and resource in reviewing it, or reviewing its review, if you understand me, in relation to where it stands?
Short answer is yes, it will be reviewed, so that the changes that have taken place in GB will be taken into account. Okay. So but that hasn't been landed yet. But I mean, we'll have to take the Minister's views on the change in hierarchy. A lot of the changes are technical and quite routine. The highway code something to keep under review. But short answer is yes, Chair, we will.
Could you explain how the safe systems approach could work and minimise poor decisions?
Caroline, do you want to?
I think so the whole impact, or the whole idea of the safe system, it's a holistic approach and it's multi-sectoral, and it includes all disciplines related to the roads, so road safety, your engineering, your design, your post-crash response. It seeks to encourage active and sustainable travel, so ultimately I suppose the more people we get to move in some more sustainable transport methods, for example using public transport, perhaps walking, cycling, it should reduce in turn the amount of roads in the cars, which in turn should reduce the amount of casualties.
And what thought has the department given to the proposed road safety forum? What would it look like in practice?
I would say that that's something that's under consideration at the moment. As part of the strategy, we've committed to looking at a governance process. As I've sort of alluded to, there's a high level of support for a road safety forum. So as part of that process, what we intend to do is look at the previous forum, see the membership, see how it worked, and also consider, is that still the best approach going forward? Or, do we need a different approach? And then what sort of stakeholder engagement and involvement that would have, and at what level? It may be that we have a strategic road safety forum followed by more lower level operational forums to support that, but it's very, very much under consideration, and we would welcome any views around that.
Okay, I know, and I think it's also keeping on the theme of being holistic, particularly relating to the department. Obviously this committee has had a lot of concern, particularly of recent times, in relation to road maintenance projects and how their delays are having a significant impact on general road safety, whether that's maintenance delays or whether that's new road infrastructure projects, given, and I'm sure you're well aware of the tragic circumstances, particularly west of the province, is certainly something that this committee would be interested to see how the proposed strategy could perhaps influence the overall road infrastructure sort of system within the department to ensure that they can work collaboratively together. Have you any views in relation to that?
I mean, it has come out through the consultation that obviously, it's part of the safe roads is part of the issue. One of the things that we're doing going forward is we're going to put in place a high-level action plan for 1 year, on the basis that the consultation document and the proposed draft strategy have identified a fair number of issues that are going to require drawing on the stakeholder working that Caroline was doing. So one of the next steps that we'll be doing is to developing key performance indicators as part of the outcome-based indicator approach, working with key stakeholders. So we're saying there is work that needs to be done to make sure that all those elements are drawn together. An action plan for covering 1 year will identify that, because this is it becomes more subtle, complex. An awful lot of the gains to be got are probably now, if we look at the impact that's been taking place on road safety, we've made massive gains when wearing seatbelts became compulsory. Cars have become safer. A lot of the things that we're now looking at will actually have a positive impact as we get down to addressing those last terrible tragedies that still take place. The gains become more difficult to get to, and if they weren't more difficult to get to, we'd have done them already. I mean, nobody is anything other than passionate about making sure that everything's done properly. So that is something that we'll be doing through the key performance indicators, is actually looking at how those interconnections and joint stakeholder working go together.
Another thing that has been brought to my attention, and I hope it is in relation to this, I think it can be, and it has caused me concern, is obviously the need to engage widely with different stakeholders in relation to a proposed road safety strategy. There's no doubt we need to bring people with us. And obviously one of the key themes within this department, since I have certainly come on board, has been it's focused on sustainable travel, yes, but also environmental friendly travel, particularly looking back on COP, etc. as well. It has come to my attention, obviously, that there is a section focused on trailer weights, for example, particularly agricultural vehicles. I would certainly be very concerned about that, because I think it's not taken into account the wider picture, because a lot of the farming sector who would liaise with me on this would talk about the additional weight that has been added to their vehicles through trying to take on board more environmental friendly systems of operating. I particularly think of the slurry season, for example, where large trailer weights have been added due to the attempt for dribble bars, etc., to be able to make them more sustainable, and that there's not it's straight into the ground. Another one could be, there has been a development in larger style trailers, for example, which reduces the number of vehicle movements, which in itself is trying to address an environmental target. And I fear that if we go down the road through a safety strategy of trying to limit further trailer weights on agricultural vehicles, yes, understanding the safety aspect, but it also is counterproductive in their attempts to make their farm business models more environmental and sustainable. And I think that's something that may need to be taken into account. I think I can always rationalise the reduction in speed, but in this instance, and I can understand why some officials may believe that is a perhaps proposed benefit to road safety, but I think we have to take into account the holistic picture. Have you any comment on that? I know I've just been particularly, this has been something that's been brought to my attention quite continually.
I would add that, the whole area of agricultural vehicles, particularly in rural roads, has been drawn to our attention through the consultation process and indeed the engagement with particularly some of the PCSPs. So it is an issue we're aware of. I know there was some suggestions in the consultation responses around the introduction of licensing requirements around agricultural vehicles, perhaps even driver licensing requirements as opposed to vehicle licence. So it's something, I suppose, just to reflect, we are aware of it, and it's something we will consider. And I suppose the other thing just to point out is in terms of the SAFE system, it's a holistic approach, but the whole emphasis of it is to unshared responsibility. So we're very much aware that everybody is responsible for safety on the roads, and indeed, whenever we're bringing forward any further policy or changes, legislative changes, it's important that the considerations of all road users are considered.
Yeah, and I suppose I can understand any policy that is in an attempt to change behavioural habits of a driver, and necessarily would be supportive of that. But I certainly just want you to take away, I'm certainly not supportive of restricting through weights of vehicles, which perhaps has a knock-on impact whenever, particularly a farming sector who feel very vulnerable at present because of the continual focus, particularly from a climate perspective, on their industry. That is, in a sense, when they have made massive investments to try and make their farm models more sustainable, environmental friendly, that perhaps on the other hand, we could be basically taking that away. So it's a concern that I would have.
Yeah, I thank you for raising that in the detail you have. I appreciate that, so we can go away and think further about that. But I mean, there's no impetus through this strategy on trying to get people, encouraging them to put greater weights on, and obviously the use of those vehicles, there are limits within which the vehicles are supposed to be loaded, and I know that there are processes now. I'm slightly unsighted on this, but I know there are processes whereby if people want to have larger or they're excessively long or heavy or non-manoeuvrable vehicles, they require interaction with the department. I'm not across all the detail of that, but it is.
Could perhaps, could you maybe come back to me? Because I believe actually what I was told was that the department, the minister was in the process of bringing forward a reduction in trailer weight, particularly pertaining to agricultural vehicles. Perhaps if you could maybe come back to me on that, would be certainly helpful for me. I assumed, and I was told it was in relation to the development of a road safety strategy, but I'm not getting that indication from you, which is good.
It's not.
No.
But if you could come back to me on that.
Absolutely. Very happy to, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I have a number of questions. I'm going first to Liz Kimmins and then to Cathal Boylan. Go on ahead.
Try again. Thank you. I should be paying attention more. No, thank you both. I mean, for the briefing, and it is something I suppose, and like others have a particular interest. It's probably one of the biggest issues that we get as in terms of constituencies issues around road safety. And I know I've raised this in a previous meeting that I was concerned about the target for reducing the number of people killed by road collisions. And in 2020 it was by 60%, and now in this strategy it's proposed to be 50%. And it is recognised in the consultation that the UN and the WHO Global Plan for the Decade of Road Safety includes targets of preventing at least 50% of road traffic deaths and injuries by 2030. So I just wanted to reiterate the point. I know, Caroline, you had said there around, that the vast majority of respondents agreed with the targets, but I still feel it's something that we need to think about. So it was just to try and get an update on that. What is the department's current position? Are you intending to stay with the 50% target, or has the minister made any indication on this?
No, there's no decision made at this stage. We're very much just still considering the consultation responses and seeking our analytics and statisticians' input to allow us to determine what the best way forward is going to be. But ultimately, it'll be a decision for the minister.
It is, but what I can assure you is that that recommendation that was put in was we have identified that, and that has been put to the minister explicitly. So it's something that's there in the mix, and. As you said, it was at least 50%. So yes, it's being considered. It's absolutely is on the radar. I can assure you of that, and it is something that has been highlighted. And actually, it was a very welcome, helpful challenge and piece of input. So it's definitely there in the mix and being looked at. Okay.
Well, that's good. No, it's good that it's still being looked at. I think we do need to be as ambitious as possible. And just on a second point, then. 95% of the respondents online and I suppose majority of other respondents agreed that a road safety forum should be established and that it should be chaired. A majority of them felt it should be chaired at ministerial level. So just to see would that work be taken forward, and would it include local road safety groups? I know certainly in the area that I represent there's quite a strong road safety group set up there, and I mean I suppose, as I said, we deal with so many issues, particularly, in particular areas of our constituencies, and I think it's important that, if possible, they could inform future policy. Just to give an example, I recently, just in the last couple of days, I've been dealing with the Creve Road in Uri, one that I've been raising repeatedly, along with other colleagues in the area, where there's no traffic cam and no road safety measures in place at the minute. But it's very, very highly built up in terms of the number of houses. Caroline, in your briefing, you mentioned about active travel and trying to encourage more people to take up active travel. But it's a contradiction in some ways, because the roads currently aren't safe. And one example of just a week or two ago, a lady was putting her child into the car, and the car was coming that fast, it took the door off the car and drove on that road, which is in a residential area. So it's just to kind of show I think there's a frustration out there that, you know, we're continually raising issues, but sometimes the criteria can be a blockage. So I think it's important, if we're able to do that, that there is a clear engagement with local road safety groups who can provide that invaluable insight into issues affecting their areas, and hopefully, you know, that is something that will be taken forward.
In terms of the road safety forum, we are considering that in the context of the overall governance structure of the strategy, and very strongly through the consultation process that came very clear, the idea of partnership working and the need for perhaps local PCSPs and road safety committees to be involved in that process, to exactly what you've said, highlight really local areas that need, or issues that need to be addressed. So we're very cognizant of that, and definitely as we continue to develop the governance process, it's very much in our radar.
Okay, no, that's grand, and it's important. And I mean, I don't know if it's possible at this stage, and maybe I don't know if you can even answer it, but you know, is it likely that, you know, coming out of this, if that engagement starts and a forum is formally set up, hopefully chaired at ministerial level, is it likely to try and look at, you know, the policies that are in place at the minute and try and inform those future policies so that road safety issues are taken, you know, or dealt with, I suppose, more seriously? And it's not to say that the department doesn't take it seriously, but sometimes I find that criteria is just too wide, you know, it's too narrow, sorry, and it means that lots of areas it almost needs for someone to have, unfortunately, have to be killed before proper action is taken, and that's obviously not where we want to be, especially if we are looking at targets that we've talked about in my previous question.
I think that's probably one of the key messages that has come across is, and I mean, the point you've just made is one that certainly struck me during one of the consultations that we were doing, which was everybody knows that somebody's going to get killed there, but nobody's going to do anything until they do. And I think that we're, you know, as I was saying, the whole point here is that we need to start to do the harder to do things, and those harder to do things will pay those benefits. So, and that degree of local intelligence and how it feeds through into, you know, the impact of, well, you know, of policies and actually going, do you know what, there's a rub here, I think is exactly the kind of thing that we need to start teasing out. So as Caroline said, we're still looking at that, but what's come across very, very clearly is, not surprisingly, is there's a huge amount of passion and also a huge amount of local knowledge, you know, out there. And I think that certainly I would hope that that's something that is able to be tapped into in a coherent way that actually makes a difference before things happen. And everybody wants that. It's how do we make it happen? So yes, that's...
Okay, that's brilliant. That's me, Chair. Thank you both. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Cathal Boylan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation. Just want to pick up on a point that the Chair raised. I mean, clearly the issue of the review of highway code and also graduated driver listing, but and I appreciate the UK system, but I mean, traditionally, sadly and unfortunately, most of the fatalities have been on rural roads, and that's where we need our focus. It's like you say, the harder tasks.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you saying you will do the review, but I think there needs to be a focus there, to be honest with you, because if we're serious about doing that, because the model may not be the same in Scotland, Wales, or anywhere else.
Yeah.
It's unique to ourselves, and I welcome that. Just in terms of the graduated driving licence, it's indicated here. What's your views on it, and where do you propose to go with it?
Well, the graduated driving licence is a work in progress still at this point. So, I mean, it is still being taken forward. The lead on that is through the DVA, and that is something that is being progressed. I can get you a more detailed update on that, Cathal, if that would be helpful. Just so, but yes, it is being progressed. It's been knocked aside by events.
Right. Caroline, you were saying about the culture change, and we talked about active travel, and especially school travel. And I mean, there's a way forward there in it. Could you expand on your ideas? I mean, clearly that's going to need investment, but I think that's one of our starting points, because if we look at the age group, unfortunately, of those fatalities, and a number of the accidents is a certain age group. So the earlier we get that programs rolled out, and besides the environmental issues and active travel, and we've learned a lot of things through COVID. Just expand, how do you, like, I know I see here, there's been great encouragement and consultations, but it's how we get this. It's about outcomes at the end of the day. So,
absolutely,
you know, your views on that. How do you see that going? And they do. The forum certainly is welcome, but the forum has to come up with outcomes and you know what I mean, projections and all of that goes with it. So.
think in terms of, like you said, I mean, it's encouraging culture change at a young age, and it is, for example, you know, trying to get kids to be able to walk to school, not always possible, down to infrastructure, so a lot of this comes down to funding and resource, unfortunately. But I mean, there's a lot we can do in terms of communication, awareness, education. You know, we do as part of, currently as part of our division, you know, we do promotion and outreach within schools to go and educate and, you know, teach about road safety. So it's looking again to see, is there anything more that can be done? You know, is there any of our stakeholders or other government bodies, delivery groups that we can work with to try, you know, to get into schools to encourage those younger kids at a younger age, you know, to really instill those behaviours in them?
Well, in this case, it has to be, because the chair has mentioned it, it's going to have to be across departmental.
Oh,
you know, SERA and education and everything else. If we're serious about addressing it, because we've been talking about it for a number of yeal and obviously regional imbalance, and we need to look at it.
Yeah.
There needs more investment.
What I would say is absolutely, and again, I'll bring it back to the shared responsibility of this strategy. It's not just for DFI, it's for all departments and all stakeholders to buy into this, to be committed to this. And I would say that we have been engaging with other departments in terms of our action plan to try and identify actions that we can take, you know, both within DFI but also within the other departments, other strategies, policies they're bringing forward that will indeed impact on, for example, kids, you know, making kids instilling that culture change, you know, from a young age. So I'd say behind the scenes there's a lot of work we are going on. We're very aware of that and keen to make sure that everybody buys into this.
Absolutely, to be a key part of the forum.
Absolutely.
You know, there's no
We've, I mean, we've staged extensively, as you would expect, with the blue lights, and we've also, you know, had a lot of the other key departments. So that absolutely, I can assure you, that is going on and going with great, with great enthusiasm from other departments, as you would expect.
I would add also to that, as well as part of the engagement, we engaged with the Youth Justice Agency, who facilitated engagement with youth who had come to their attention through illegal driving, and really what came through that, you know, was very informative, and also what it highlighted really is as much to educate young people as it is their parents, and that's the key thing we drew from that. So I suppose
schools,
and engagement to schools as well. Yeah, we engaged and had a focus group questionnaires with a range of schools. So all of that, you know, we've engaged quite extensively with young people to try and seek their views. We also invited a lot of the student union to engage with us, NISI, the youth forum. So again, as we go forward in this process, we're very keen that anybody who has a voice to be heard wants to be heard, you know, and we're very keen to engage with young children going forward.
And my final point, Chair, because I'm mindful of SIDS, they're a good idea, but I'll have to get a wee bit parochial here, because every other member will at some point. But the likes of, I just use two examples. Points Pass in Middletown in my own constituency, because of the criteria, the type of roads they are, it inhibits them. Now they put SIDS in, so they're in for 3 months, then they're taken out. And now it does work for a period. But I would like to see in the overall strategy, you know, something more permanent going forward. Because I mean, whilst it does work now, it works when they're in. So, for say Points Pass, I think there's one either side, or Middletown there's one either side of the town. So they take it 3 months, move it, and then you get the data and you see it's going okay. But once they come out of there, it's not. So I would like to, like you were saying about suggestions, I'd like to see more permanency. Now, I'm sure there's other areas right across the whole of the north, but I'm only using that as an example. You know, whilst the SIDS and the PCSPs are doing the work, and the councils, at some point we need some permanency if we're serious with it.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, as Caroline has already said, there was a lot of rural issues raised particularly, and a lot of the issues are raised around SIDS. The strategy will be higher level than that. It'll be the action plan that'll probably get into addressing those. So, but SIDS has been raised quite a lot, so it's certainly on our
Well, there are clear examples that will guide it, because that's the evidence, that's the factual evidence base that will assist, you know.
And indeed the PCSPs, as part of our engagement with them through the consultation process, were very vocal around SIDS and the demand they would like to see more.
Absolutely. On the radar. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, and I will say, and I suppose, declare a membership of the Policing Board of Northern Ireland, but I know that as police resources are getting more finite, SIDS have been an incredible provision for rural communities through the PCSPs. Permanent SIDS actually have really, in themselves, become a focus in rural communities to you know, there's more conversations now about speed of travel and being more aware of what's actually in the locality, I think when it's flashing up before you is a great help. So I certainly would support that recommendation.
You get a smiley face come through, Chair, you're all right.
I know, you do
The
actually.
red face, it's not so good. Yeah.
Okay, moving now
Never seen one of
to
those.
Cara Hunter, please, for a question.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the panel for the briefing this morning. And I know you can't see me. Apologies, I've had a few technical issues, so apologies to members as well if I do repeat questions. But thank you both, Caroline and Chris. I really appreciate your comments there around, early intervention with education with our young people and the importance of engagement around road safety, and also touching on that regional imbalance issue which we do see. And my question just refers to, can you please give me an update regarding the careless driving consultation, and also can you detail to us the impact of no executive on the road safety strategy? Thank you.
So the careless driving consultation, the consultation closed on, I think, the 22nd of January this year. So that consultation has run and has been closed and is now under consideration as to what the outcomes of the analysis taking place. To take that forward will require 3 statutory rules, and they will need to be I think they will need to be taken forward in conjunction with the PSNI and DOJ. So that's where we are on that. They will require statutory rules to be taken forward, and the results of the outcome, the results of the consultation are still being analysed and considered.
Great. And then just a little bit of clarity there, just on the impact no executive will have regarding a road safety strategy. To be honest, I'm not quite sure what the clear answer on that is. What we know is we're working to finish the road safety strategy, and then I'm not quite sure I think that issue is under consideration as to what the next steps will be. That becomes a political matter, so I'm not really decided or is to give an answer on that. Thank you. And then just lastly, I note in our briefing there's the inclusion of e-scooters and regarding e-scooters trials, and there's much debate across these islands. I've spoken with political colleagues based in Liverpool about safety issues with e-scooters. So I'm just wondering, do you have any updates or any more information regarding this?
So we are still awaiting the outcome of the trial. And the evidence is continuing to accumulate, and the situation in here remains as it is, that they're not legal to use on the roads, and there is the evidence that is coming from the various trials that are taking place in GB, and we're waiting the outcome of that. So that's the current situation on that. Anything to add?
Just really, I suppose it was raised as part of the consultation, and I suppose it was acknowledged that the impact e-scooters could have on a sustainable travel, as an option. Obviously, the alternative to that is the safety aspect. And I suppose coming from the consultation, it was just, to make sure that all road users' views were considered in advance of any decision, following the outcome of those trials and our consideration of that being made.
Okay.
That's great, Caroline. Thank you.
Thank you. Go now to Patrick Delargy.
Yeah, so my first point, and Jonathan's raised already, obviously we have had numerous tragedies, particularly on the A5. That stretch of road as well as the A1 was something that I noticed had come up quite a lot with respondents in terms of prioritising those stretches of road. Is that something that is going to be prioritised within the action plan?
So, I mean, those run on their own track. So within this strategy, which is looking at all these various cross-cutting things, it doesn't get into the individual road projects. So, I mean, I know that members are updated on that on a regular, and probably you're better cited on it than I am, but those individual road projects are not. But the overall thing about having safe roads and not being a major contributor to safety is. So it's neither entangled with it nor slowed down nor speeded up by it. It goes as quickly as it can on its own track, if that...
I suppose then, just in terms of strategic pieces of road or large pieces of infrastructure like that, are they given priority rather than specifics like the A5 or the A1? Or in general, are those types of roads given priority within the strategy?
Not specifically.
Not specifically. I suppose what we're trying to do is it's at a strategic level, so it's high level, and fall from that will be, what the priority areas are and what action we can take. And a lot of it's going to be down to ministerial decisions and funding. Yeah. To be quite honest, there's
going to be. I mean, the reality is that there is
there is an issue around maintenance of roads and prioritisation of roads, and obviously the executive has taken a view on executive flagship projects. So those are there. That is, I mean, the straightforward answer is probably that's going to be difficult decisions taken about where a limited resource is spent, and so this is up there. The road safety strategy, which is safe roads are an incredibly important consideration of that. It doesn't get down into those decisions, so I know that.
So that probably lies with the minister, then those type of decisions.
Those big decisions would, and sort of the whole
Yeah.
issue about the allocation of priorities and stuff, the allocation of resources and things
Thanks
like
for
that.
clarifying that for me. I just have one more point, and it's just around, I suppose, looking at there's a greater number of pedestrians killed, particularly in deprived areas. I know, Caroline, when you'd been talking about, the greater active travel, that was one. I worked as a primary school teacher before I took on this role, and that was one of the key factors which put a lot of parents off active travel, was particularly with younger children. Letting them cross busy stretches. I mean, off the top of my head, I can think of quite a few in Derry. The one probably first and foremost is along the Foyle Road, which is always been a stretch which we've tried time and time again, get the likes of SID to try and get traffic calming measures, but that's never happened, and I often wonder, would that problem be replicated in a less deprived area? I would say probably not. So I suppose it all feeds in, and again what you're saying, it ties in with those issues around active travel, and this is obviously a key kind of thing that has to come before that. So around that, is that going to be a stronger commitment within the strategy to try and to make sure that deprived areas there isn't such a high rate of either fatalities or of serious injuries?
I will say that is something that we're considering. We are aware, from the data it shows about deprived areas. So we're keen to engage with different departments like DFC and to see what can we be done really, in terms of addressing road safety issues in deprived areas.
I mean, as part of the feedback on the equality impacts of it was, there was that age issue about children travelling safely to. I mean, in short, the answer is it's complicated, but obviously that is what we would want. And so I think that as you address these issues, the impact will probably be disproportionately better in the areas that are currently disproportionately worse. But that it's. Yes is the short answer, I suppose, but complex, and it's going to require a lot of things to all align.
And I appreciate at the minute, we're not kind of into the action plan, but are there any specific areas or strategies that you're looking at to do that? Or?
So the action plan will be high level and for a year, and part of that action plan will be a commitment to work with other stakeholders to develop the whole thing about the outcome-based accountability and the key KSIs, strategic indicators. Is that what you do is you then start to identify what those bits are that people need to do, because I mean, as I said already, there's a lot of bits. This is the hard bit, the more subtle bits, and I think this is exactly the kind of thing. This is exactly the kind of thing that you would kind of think needs to be picked up, but it's going to need thought through. So,
and I would just add, our strategy very aware it needs to be tied into all other strategies across the executive. One of those is the social inclusion strategy. So as part of that, we will look to see where our road safety strategy fits in, and if there's any departments in that we can collaborate with to try and address issues in deprived areas.
Well, thanks very much for your clarification. That's great.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks for coming along, and I think this has been a very useful discussion. I think we all know what the responses to road safety are. They're education, engineering and enforcement, and we've been going over some elements of that. I think around the engineering, they need to invest in roads maintenance and also into safe and segregated routes for active travel is really important. So this has to be taken in the wider sphere in terms of investment around that. I'm just going to pick up just a couple of things. It was in the consultation and the outcomes, and one of the ones was in relation to outcome 1, which is safe people, and it was support for review of the highway code. Now, I know that review of the highway code was undertaken across the water and was published, and I just want to have an update about whenabouts we're sort of going to maybe catch up in relation to that in Northern Ireland in relation to the highway code. The other question I had was, obviously there's an ongoing consultation around pavement parking, and we'll wait for the outcome of that, but it's about 20 miles an hour speed limit. So the issues around road safety is one of the sort of key issues people contact me locally about, and it is about the speed of vehicles, particularly outside schools and residential areas generally. And within the comments it says 20 miles an hour zones for urban areas and consideration of the extension of these to cover the whole school journey. So whilst it's welcome that the department have been introducing 20 miles an hour outside some schools, it's not all, but also it covers the entire school journey. So I'm trying to encourage people to walk or cycle to and from sort of school, but they need to have a safe journey all the way there. I'm just very interested to know what the department's views are in relation to that idea that the 20 miles an hour zones should be for the entire school journey. So it's that, and also the highway code, and updating that.
So the highway code will be updated. It's one of my responsibilities, so I should be more cited on it than I probably am. But basically, we are going to update the highway code. There are publication dates. And so GB have had a publication date, so there has been a publication. The highway code gets updated in between times, but it's not limited to publication. So that will be taking place over the next. We will be looking at that sort of pretty much as soon as we can get to it.
Okay.
And the minister, that is what the minister wants. I can't give you anything more definitive than that.
Okay.
But certainly, it's there to be looked at just sort of once we get this done. So imminently, I think is probably about the best. It's not going to be back end of next year. It's going to be over the next sort of number of weeks and months is when we get into looking at that. So that's hopefully, if you want any more detail, I can get back to
I
you.
just understood that the next publication date was meant to be last month or something like that. I'm just concerned that there's been we need to be able to move on that, because it is the highway code may be seen to some people to be a document, but also ensures road safety.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah. So it is going to be done imminently, and I can get back to you if you want further detail, firmer detail about that. But it is there to be looked at. On the comment about the 20 miles an hour, I suppose this was one of the suggestions that was put to us. I suppose it depends on what the difference for rural and urban. It's just going to be different. So that's going to be feasible for perhaps for. If it's a small urban, if it's an urban school with a catchment area that's really quite close, I don't know. So that would need to be worked through.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're in a rural area or your catchment area is 8 to 10 miles, that's not going to be possible. So it was a suggestion that would need looked at.
Yeah,
rather than.
Yeah. I know in Wales that they're piloting 20 miles an hour in urban areas, and I just have a frustration that in a number of aspects we're sort of playing catch up here in Northern Ireland, and there isn't any sort of desire to do that sort of trial that they're doing in Wales, and there's 20 Plenty, which is the campaign that's sort of led behind that, and just be interested to know the views, because that would be a key part of the road safety.
Yeah, no, I would agree, and I mean, I would just say that there is ongoing engagement with the devolved administrations, in terms of keeping abreast of what's going on and possibly learning from their experiences. And I know definitely within our road service, that it is in their radar, the whole 20 mile per hour. I suppose that from my understanding, it was the review of the rollout of the 20 miles per hour zones at school, which led to further schools being included in that. And I suppose it would likely be our desire to continue to do that, but a lot of these things, it comes down to funding.
But there are areas in Belfast city centre that are 20 mile an hour.
Yeah.
So it is something that is on the radar, and something that is, and it certainly is something that would be considered. So absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's important. It is, and I was at a primary school in my constituency yesterday morning when children were being dropped off, and it doesn't have the 20 miles an hour outside it, and there is so there's a need to be able to roll out that scheme a bit further, because you have cars coming along, and whilst 30 miles an hour is the speed limit, it's not safe because there's children coming in and out between vehicles and stuff like that. So there's a need to ensure safety around that. So it's important that we raise this. And as other people have said, you need to invest in roads maintenance. You need to invest in safer cycling infrastructure to get the outcomes in relation to this. So thank you.
Okay, before we go to Roy to finish off, Patrick, you have a comment on the back of Andrew's?
Just a very, very quick one. It had been something that had been raised in my constituency as well, around the 20 mile an hour zones. And another thing that was raised was around accessibility. That a lot of cars, particularly as they were speeding through, it was making it a very perilous journey, particularly for children with physical disabilities. So it's just something, as that strategy progresses, just the...
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, excuse me. Finally, Roy Beggs, please.
Again, thanks for your presentation. One of the things that's briefly mentioned was active travel, where more people are walking and cycling. And I'm just trying to clarify, is there a recognition that with more people walking and cycling, there is a higher risk of accident affecting those, and has the balance of investment and risk changed to reflect that in your policies?
Well, certainly at the start of the pandemic, whenever the volume of traffic reduced and the number of pedestrian and cycling journeys increased as people were avoiding public transport for health reasons, the department did invest in campaigns to raise awareness of both pedestrians for their own safety and for vehicle drivers, for the safety of pedestrians as well, the fact that everybody has a responsibility for that. So that was addressed through, as Andrew said, there's education, enforcement, and I've forgotten engineering. So there was in that on a wider. I think though that was one aspect. I think you're asking something wider. Apologies if that's.
Has that increased risk been recognised so that there's the investment follows to address issues?
Yes, so that was certainly an immediate recognition of that increased risk, of the fact that pedestrians are vulnerable road users, and then so the advertising campaign was done as a quick response to immediately raise public awareness both of pedestrians and of other road users to ensure that was.
But ultimately it will also have a requirement for investment in actual road safety issues surely as well?
I mean, I couldn't give a detailed answer on the...
Well, I know just from the consultation, that it was keen folks to, invest in the current transport system, the current roads, to make sure it's still, usable and safe for everybody. But the other side of it was to ensure that going forward, new road design and that included...
It's always a consideration, so yes, absolutely.
Turning to speed indicator devices, SIDS, they are... recognised as playing a very positive impact, particularly in rural villages where there may not be any police present, or police are unable to be everywhere, etc. And I'm certainly aware that they are heavily used in rural villages in Scotland. Virtually every urban area that a road would go through would have them. So my question around that is, what assessment has there been of their effectiveness in reducing traffic in such locations so that they might be more widely used in Northern Ireland? Has there been any formal assessment on the effectiveness of SIDS in reducing speed?
Yeah, my understanding is that is considered on an ongoing basis, and we can probably get more details around that.
Yeah, I mean, I know that the evidence from SIDS is analysed and fed in to, but yeah, yes, I think, to be honest, one of the things that has come across from this consultation and the work that we've been doing is the issue about SIDS has been raised, and there's a lot of support for SIDS and they're very visible, and we react to them as well. And I think that probably one of the things that we would really want to look at is firming up the place of SIDS in sort of the hierarchy of where they are in the deployment of road things. I think that is something that probably they're there, and a lot of them is down to the use, to the individual investment of a community police partnership. So I think that what needs to be done is that to be drawn out and looked at in sort of in a wider basis. But that I would imagine.
The police partnership ones tend to be mobile ones, but what I'm actually talking about is more permanent ones, which are widely used elsewhere. If you have an assessment of the effectiveness of those, I certainly would welcome that information. Turning now to other issues which can affect road safety matters. Road safety and pothole repairs, there has been a particular issue there over the last number of years. Pothole having to be 2 inches deep before it would be repaired, etc. And then you get the situation where drivers swerve to miss potholes. They know there are deep holes but not yet repaired. What assessment has been on that contribution by the department because of their allocation of what limited funding they get and not ensuring that potholes are speedily repaired?
So I'm not cited on any individual analysis of the effect of potholes per se. I know that there are the processes whereby the roads colleagues would assess them, but ultimately this comes down to driver behaviour. So a driver is supposed to ultimately, if they're aware there's a pothole, they should take account of that in the speed that they're travelling at and adjust their behaviour accordingly. I mean, that is I know. But ultimately, that is the thing. If you know that there's a pothole, you need to drive accordingly and take account of the safety of others as well as yourself.
And what if you spot it at the last minute and then decide to swerve and miss it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. It's not something that's detailed.
Do you recognise that departmental policies can contribute adversely to road safety matters?
I'm not entirely sure I would go that far. They certainly considered it. Certainly, road safety would be something that they want to address through maintenance, and there are decisions taken about the limited resources that are available for maintenance and using those. So, I mean, I'm not cited on the individual.
Okay. Turning to DVA and the MOT delays and scenarios, again, I would argue that the way we are operating, or the department is operating MOTs with the large backlogs, is contributing to risks. Because one, you have vehicles on the road which are not MOT'd, which have been being allowed to drive on until they get their test because of the unavailability of tests. But secondly, you have others that you cannot get their vehicles taxed, and they may take their vehicle off the road, and therefore there are more people perhaps walking in rural roads without footpaths, etc. So again, do you recognise there are wider policies within your department which contribute adversely to road safety risks?
And bearing in mind we're coming on to the next briefing sessions on Biennial, so just...
it's very much on my mind. I
think Mr. Beggs is maybe preempting the briefing.
Do we answer, Chris?
I mean, the issue is that whenever a vehicle is not MOT'd, it is the responsibility of the driver to make sure that it's in a fit and safe condition. That's the bottom line on this. And an MOT is valid for that moment when you drive out, and then so it is the responsibility ultimately of the driver.
Right. I would argue that the department needs to get its house fully in order. Okay, thank you.
I'm going to allow Cal Boylan for a quick supplementary, and then I mean quick because we're moving on to the next briefing.
No, thanks, Chair, because I mean it's an interesting point Andrew brought it up. I mean, because when you rate road service out, when we're talking about road safety issues out at schools, if you go to a primary school at 9 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock or 3, you can't get past it because it's all jammed, right? So they use that conversation comes out. So we've got to get it right. If we're talking about active travel or we're talking about full journeys that Andrew is, let's not muddy the waters. If we're going to do active travel, if we're going to provide cycle lanes or walking paths to encourage that, let's not be saying all right, because I know that we're not going to say anything to parents who want to drive the kids to school. So as part of the strategy, let's get that right. Let's not be talking both ways, because we're trying to encourage active travel. There are occasions there when certainly parents do take their kids to school, but we need to don't muddy the waters on that point, please.
Okay, point noted. Look, thank you very much for that, and I understand that you're both actually staying where you are for the next briefing session, and plus we will be joined online by Mr. Adrian Borland, the Safe and Accessible Travel Division as well. So look, we will give you time to get your papers sorted, but members will find the departmental briefing on biannual MOT testing from Clerk's Memo at page 147 right through to 207. Before we start, before we get a briefing, can I thank officials for coming up on this? This is something that has, I suppose, provoked a lot of conversation, both from I've come onto the committee. I think there hasn't been a single week where we haven't had a prolonged conversation about MOT testing and DVA, and particularly this issue. Whenever you talk to constituents regarding biannual MOT testing, it's fair to say it provokes a debate. Many for different reasons, and many people have different perspectives on that. So I suppose I'll hand over to you, Chris, to give a briefing to the committee, and then we'll just go around in the same format for questions.
Thank you, Chair, and again, thank you, members, for giving us the opportunity to brief the committee on this issue. So, members will be aware that MOT testing is a fully devolved matter, and so it is fully within the auspices of the Assembly here, and it is governed by primary legislation. The Minister decided to undertake an evidence gathering exercise to inform the way ahead, and we have provided a synopsis of responses document, which I'll refer to if members are content through the page numbers on that. The key questions are set out on page 8 of that document, and they are around the frequency of MOT testing for cars, like good vehicles, which essentially is smaller vans, what we would normally see them as, and also motorcycles. And the question was whether there should be a move from the current arrangements to MOT testing every 2 years. Then there were views sought on what the impact that would have potentially on road safety, the economic impact that would have particularly on the automotive industry, and finally on the environmental impact of those. So the questions teased out saying if people did think that there was a reason to support moving towards every 2 years, should they be done the same for everybody, or should there be differences in approach for private cars versus light vehicles / vans / motorcycles? So should those arrangements as currently remain at being 4 for the first plus? So currently you get your first test at 4 for a private car, and then it's every year, so that's a 4 + 1 + 1. And if you do it biannually, that would be 4 + 2 + 2 would be the mechanism for that. So do you keep it 4 plus? Do you go to 4 + 2 + 2 for private cars? For vans, do you move them to 4 for the first one, or do you keep those at 3? So there were a number of more detailed questions that were teased out. For motorbikes, the same issue. Do you go 3 + 2 + 2, 4 + 2 + 2? Also views as well as going, do you then say, well, we test you every 2 years up until a certain point, after which the vehicle becomes of such an age that you think it would be worth moving back to 1 year? So is that up until 10? And then so you do +1 + 1 after that. So there were quite nuanced questions. The number of responses set out on page 9 of the document was we got 1,244 in total, which I'm glad to say Cathal have faced you with some smaller numbers about consultations, and I'm glad to say
No, absolutely.
This is a larger sample. So of those, there were 1,100. So there were over 1,000, nearly 1,200 of those were individuals, people who just personally responded. From the automotive industry, as what we would broadly call, there were 53, of which 6 were from umbrella groups. So they were speaking on behalf of potentially hundreds, certainly scores of other representations. They made representations themselves. We had motoring organisations, we had 4 of those responded. And then we had others, so we had political parties who responded. We also had responses from PSNI, as you would imagine and expect, from NIPSA, whose members may well be affected by any changes, and also from the various insurers, representative bodies, the Association of British Insurers and the Bureau of Insurance Brokers Association. So people who provide the commercial insurance for that. So those are all set out on page 9. On page 11, then, the response to the 2-year MOT. The key question, essentially, do you support moving from an annual MOT test to a 2-yearly MOT test? The overall response was very positive for it. So 80% said they thought cars, motorcycles 77%. Interestingly, for light good vehicles, there was less for support for moving from annual to 2-yearly. I think on the basis that these are cars which are these are vehicles that are not often owned by the person who's driving them, and they are driven hard, for want of a better word, as in they're there's an asset and people like to work them hard. So it was 50% of the people who responded supported moving to 2-year. Now, broken down by those sectors that I set out, there was differences within the sectors, and essentially the responses repeated themselves. So individuals were strongly for the proposals. The automotive industry, the people who MOT your car and prepared for stuff like that, they were strongly against. Motoring groups, they were for the proposal. Others, the PSNI and the insurance bodies, were strongly against. So there was a strong support from private individuals. Other organisations expressed strong reservations, and that essentially carried itself through both on road safety, economic impact and environmental impact. That pattern of responses, if private individuals didn't think that there would be an economic impact, didn't think there'd be environmental impact, didn't think there'd be a road safety impact. The PSNI and the insurers were more concerned that those would be, and that pattern just repeated itself through the consultation. So those are set out at pages 19, 21, 23. The other impacts we asked about, and the industry had raised some concerns about the potential impact it would have on the second-hand car market and people perhaps wanting to source cars from GB. But that's one that would certainly need to be further teased out. And another issue that was raised, which was that in the event of moving towards a two-year process, there would need to be a lot of education that would need to be around supporting that. Now, just to put this in, so to set out the next steps, Chair, if I can give you again just to set this where this particular piece of work sits. So the Minister has put out a press release on the 16th, that was Wednesday of last week, and she noted there was a variety of views and there was a high volume of interest in this issue that just set out through the responses, and she feels that she stated that there was sufficient evidence to explore next steps. So what we have done thus far is take a call for evidence, and a call for evidence is just that, going, what are your views? The next steps that would need to be taken would be to look at developing that into a proposal for consultation. So that is not the stage we're at. We're at a step back from the consultation, which is a prerequisite to making any actual changes. So this is a step before that. So she has asked, and she has commissioned officials, instructed officials to engage with key stakeholders. So those key stakeholders are NIPSA and staff, because of the potential impact that would have on the internal staffing within the department, with the PSNI, with the industry and with insurers. So with an aim towards doing the preliminary policy development work to look at commencing the work that would need to be done to develop a proposal sufficiently to a point where it could be out for a public consultation. Now, she has also recognised that that would be it would be beyond the end of this mandate before any legislation that would be able to affect these changes would take place, because, as I said, fully devolved matter and under the auspices of primary legislation, which is for the Assembly to attend to. So, Chair, hopefully that whistle-stop tour has drawn out key points.
No, it certainly has, and thank you for your extensive briefing on the matter. There's a lot of information here. There's a lot of statistics that members have to try and get their heads around, and maybe even, and I'm sure the department as well. It's very, very timely that this briefing follows the previous briefing, actually, because whenever we have talked in this committee about even dealing with MOTs throughout COVID, etc., there's always been the constant kickback regarding road safety, and that's something that the committee have found very hard to tackle, because obviously it's a very serious concern. And I suppose probably, and looking at that, there's been an extensive response to this call for evidence, and there's you can see the divergence of views very, very clearly. And I suppose what I would like to ask to begin with is, obviously, the vast majority of those that responded to this consultation have a vested interest, one way or the other. We can't deny that. In fact, any road user has a vested interest. So I suppose probably what I'm trying to bottom out here is there a mechanism in relation to weighting responses? Has that been given any consideration to? And if so, how would you go about doing that, given that so many interested parties have a particular viewpoint on it?
So, as a former statistician,
Good, you're the right man
to declare an interest. Well, as a former statistician, it's all very complicated. It's probably the yes. So, I mean, obviously, the whenever we get into an analysis of the impacts of this, it actually becomes very quickly very complicated, which is why we set out that there are the groups, and drew attention to members' fact that there are umbrella bodies who have made responses. And I think that, so At this point in time, because it was a call for evidence, this was looking to see what the interest and appetite was. So we haven't done any further detailed statistical analysis because the broad groupings are actually able to inform where this debate is actually, where this debate is formed. You can see that the various groups are. So in that regard, I think that the analysis was probably fit for purpose in that it draws out. Now, as we move into a next stage of developing proposals for consultation, we'd have to look at that. I know that as we look at the impacts it will have in certain ways, for service delivery, that's going to need modelled out. That's going to need quite a bit of tricky, complicated work. And I left being a statistician behind 20 years ago, so I know enough to know not to go there. Is probably the short answer. But it's something I think that we drew attention to specifically because it does give a, but there's no magic number we can put on it that says this means that means a 15% we need to think about. I think we're all capable of going. We can see how the interest groups align on this, and so it's
okay. I think, and also speaking directly to that issue, so how can we as a go? We have a committee research paper here which is sort of trying to quantify that road safety risk in relation to the statistics as to the number of vehicles that have caused road accidents due to their state of roadworthiness. What's the department's assessment of that?
The statistics are quite clear. Human error is the vast majority of the key contributor. 95% of particularly KSI, killed and seriously injured incidents, are due to human error, and 1% are due to mechanical failure, as it is recorded. I mean, that's a bold fact, and so it is. Which is why as Mr. Muir said, you do have the three aspects, the triangle of looking at the enforcement, education, and engineering. So it's a relevant fact, just that it is a small number, which is heartening, obviously, but it's just something else that needs to be considered as you go forward.
So is it a case, and I think I've read the number, I don't have it offhand, but the percentage of vehicles involved in collisions and the cause of accidents being roadworthiness, it is very, very small. It's a percentage on it. What is it? I think it's
around 1%. It's 1 or under, depending on.
So it's an extremely low number. Despite that, is probably one of the biggest concerns that have been presented to the committee, because it's an issue we take very serious. So taking that into consideration, how does that mirror with many MOT providers in terms of servicing vehicles? Their anecdotal evidence as to the state of vehicles whenever they go pre-MOT tests. How do those two correspond?
Well, I mean, there is an issue, and it's been drawn attention to. And it's not. I think it's probably. I mean, anecdotal evidence is evidence, and the PSNI have raised concerns about that similar issue, and particularly as we enter into difficult economic times. Will people prioritise the maintenance of their vehicle without the nudge of a reminder from that's a question that has been raised through this consultation. So it is an absolutely legitimate question. So we just need to consider that and sort of look further as we move into the next steps. That will get teased out, poured over, mulled about further. So but absolutely, it's a legitimate point.
Like I do have considerable sympathy. Whenever I look at the principle of biennial testing, and whenever I look at the country models, I think it's like looking at football formations, but 4-2-2 seems pretty prevalent.
It is, yes.
Yeah. Now, with that being said, I suppose a lot of other factors have to be taken into account in terms of the state of roads, etc. as well, and we've covered that topic before. But is it fair to say that 4-2-2 model is the prevailing trail of thought, particularly in Europe, for MOT testing?
It's certainly a lot of it. Chair, if you were content, I would ask Adrian Borland, who undertook this research, and my colleague to, hopefully he's there on star leave.
Absolutely.
I'm looking to see him. Liz. Good stuff.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can indeed, Adrian.
Hang on a second. Hang on a second.
Yes, Adrian.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. Yes, the sort of standard European model would be 4-4-2, and certainly the the directives that cover it, the European directives that cover it, that's the standard that they require. And in some countries, have some variations in that, but 422 is the minimum standard that Europe requires. Of course, we're not part of Europe anymore, but at the minute we're looking towards that 422.
You're getting
And
mixed
the
up
consultation.
with
You're
football.
going to play a football formation there for a
4-4-2. Yeah, 4-4-2. Yeah, 4-2-2. Yeah, that's certainly the European standard.
Okay, and so that's just some initial questions I suppose would have. I suppose probably when the department does go out for consultation, what steps will be taken to actively seek the views of organisations with specific interests in road safety? I think we have the appropriate people to talk to us about that. And will greater weight be given to responses from organisations like that? I suppose it's getting into the same train of thought. Weighting's going to be something that we're going to have to take into account here, and indeed be led by the department on and the quality of those responses.
So absolutely, and those that have already responded to the call for evidence would be engaged with individually and specifically as part of the consultation. And it's believed they were with Adrian. There was quite extensive consultation in the call for evidence, and we will replicate that and enhance that as we go through. Adrian, do you want to comment on the?
No, I mean, certainly some of the bigger automotive industry players who we spoke to would, I think they, to some extent, were keeping their powder dry, given this was a call for evidence. And certainly, I mean, they were of the opinion that if it went to a formal consultation, they would be, engaging a lot, putting a lot more effort into responding and doing their own surveys and one thing and another, but they were very keen to be involved if it got to the stage where we were formally consulting. There's a reservoir of data and information there that no doubt they will flow to us.
I think it's just, and I'll finish on this last 2 points, but I think it's very important from a committee's perspective that this is based and rooted in deep evidence as to outcomes, because, again, a primary concern of this committee is road safety, and we're taking that into account. But again, whenever we hear statistics about the 1%, etc., and it is something that this committee really does want to see hard evidence as to the best way forward. You mentioned next steps. Do you have rough indications on timescales on that? I'm thinking about realistic timescales. If, for example, something was to go ahead or not, depending on what happens in between time. But what would be realistic timescales?
The standard length of time really for policy development, particularly if it involves primary legislation, is a 2-year period. So that would be, and you would be, although the call for evidence has given us, warmed up the issue, so we're more aware as to what the issues are. I think that's a reasonable consideration of the time scale it would be.
And we appreciate your honesty on that matter. Okay, we'll go to Cara Hunter for a question, please.
Thank you, Chair, and I hope you can all hear me okay. And thank you again, Chris, for your detail on that, and I welcome it. Can you detail how this system works elsewhere? And I know you touched on there the 2-year kind of mark, just looking at what the next steps would be for here. But looking elsewhere, across the globe, I looked at America briefly, and I seen it differentiates by state. So I'm just curious what other models in other countries that we could use or look at here. Thank you.
Pass to Adrian for that one, if you're content.
We didn't look any further in terms of this call for evidence than Europe, but obviously, formal consultation, we probably would look a bit further afield. But there was in the CFE document, page 29 and 30, it was a list of the other models that are used across Europe. So, you have 4 plus 2 plus 2s. You have some 4 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1, and some people start at 3, some people start at 4 years. Going up to Switzerland, who have a 5 plus 3 plus 2 plus 2 model, so they don't start till 5, and then they wait another 3 years, before they look at them again. So they seem to have quite a high confidence rate in their vehicles. But obviously we're not thinking about that. So there is quite a broad range across Europe that sort of are founded in 4+2+2, but a lot of variation there as well. But I know, as I say, in terms of the formal consultation, we probably have to dig a bit deeper into why countries have gone for different models and probably outside Europe as well.
Thank you very much, Adrian. And I think it's really interesting looking at the different perspectives on the argument as well and looking at other models. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, indeed.
I think whenever we're looking at the issue, whenever the general public generally think MOT, they have two issues. They think service, MOT, and I think really what we need to try to do is divorce the two. That, for example, just because an MOT wasn't happening to 4 years, whatever it may be, to begin with, in 2 and 2, that doesn't necessarily mean that you wouldn't. It's good practice, and I'm not sure how you go about trying to change that narrative, but I think that is a prevailing narrative that, well, an MOT means service. Yeah. It shouldn't necessarily mean both. In fact, mileage comes in as a key consideration there, and I don't know if any consideration is given to that. That's just as relevant to the team.
It's exactly the kind of thing that we would need to tease out. I mean, absolutely is the short answer. It would need, that is one of the key issues. Because I mean, at this point in time, people by and large, you buy a car, and then the MOT comes at that, so they all just fall together naturally, unless you're doing the 10,000 miles and you do a lot of miles or whatever it is. So yes, that's exactly the kind of thing. So I mean, that was the comment that was made, was there would need to be an education plan in place in parallel with any changes for exactly that kind of an issue.
Okay, Liz Kimmins.
Thanks, Chair. And I think that's been a really good discussion. I suppose has there been any statistics from other jurisdictions on whether or not there's been a correlation? I think I've asked this before, but just between vehicle defect and biennial testing.
I'll ask Adrian again. Adrian?
You're on mute, Adrian.
Sorry.
Here you know.
Yeah, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I'm pretty sure from memory that the GB defects are a very similar rate of 1 or 2%. I'm not quite sure about the south now, but I would comment on the defect issue that. Not that there's a health warning exactly, but it's a wee bit more complicated than it might seem. I mean, certainly there's no going away from the fact that, as Chris has said, driver error, careless driving, speeding, and what have you are the major issues. But it's just for information on the way the vehicle defect statistics are produced, which is something we might need to dig a bit deeper into. Just to say that where there's a serious collision or a fatality, the police would forensically examine the vehicle, so that the experts, if you like, have a look at the vehicle itself, and they're looking for defects and things like that. But that's only where there's serious or fatal collisions. For the most part, those figures are derived from the inspecting officer when he's at the scene, filling out his incident report. So he'll have a look around the car, and he'll take evidence, obviously statements from the people involved. But it's not the forensic check. So in that sense, if there was a defect in the car, he mightn't see it or pick it up. But he'd probably note the main cause, so if it was speed or whatever, that'll be the main thing. And NIPSA in their responses have pointed this out, that that's an interesting fact, if nothing else, in terms of those statistics. And also they make the point that, where collisions are not reported to the police, there's no data on any defects that might have been involved there either. But I'd say it's something that we'll have to talk to the police statisticians about and get a bit more detail. But certainly, I mean, it doesn't seem, from my knowledge, to be unusual for the sort of the defect figure that we have to be around about that 1 or 2%.
Okay.
Sorry, no, thanks for that, Adrian. Just a quick other point. I mean, obviously, the road safety is the biggest concern that we all have in terms of any changes. So, will the department then make 100% sure that there are no road safety concerns before they reach a decision whether or not to introduce the changes?
I mean,
Yeah,
100%.
go ahead, Chris.
Sorry, yeah. I mean, that will absolutely be 100%. I think
Yeah.
the key issue that will be right at the heart of this. So, as I said, it will be for beyond the end of this mandate, for what decisions are taken. But absolutely, I mean, it's absolutely clearly one of the key considerations. So yes.
Okay.
That's grand. Thanks very much. Thanks, Mayor.
Roy Beggs.
The survey has occurred at a time when there's huge difficulty booking an MOT test. Are you surprised that 100% of people didn't want to go to biannual testing, given the hassle that there is at present? Do you not think that could have clouded the response as well?
It didn't.
Do you want me to take that, Chris?
Yeah.
And I think that there is some evidence that has, been in people's mind. And I think that's certainly something that'll need to be teased out in the consultation, because, I mean, if you look at particularly the public responses, there's a very high amount of no reasons given, for them saying yes to biennial testing. So it's not clear, to know whether that's because they're saying yes because they think biennial is, good on its own merits, or because, as you say, they're thinking, well, it'll fix the system. Now, some people have said or made some reference to the fact that, biennial would at least be able to book a test, for example. But I mean, that does need to be teased out in the formal consultation.
Yeah. I noticed that in statistics you provided us, the pass rate will drop from 95% down to about 60% for older vehicles. So do you accept there's a higher risk of defects on older vehicles, and that there would be risks in moving to biennial testing in older vehicles in particular?
Adrian,
Yeah, I think that is sort of what comes over in the survey. When it comes to extending the question about extending vehicles to biennial when they're over 10 years old, it was quite a mixed overall response. So it was only 56 and 54% overall that thought that would be a good idea. And the majority were against. 57% were against for light goods vehicles. So it was more, I think, even on the public side, there was a greater reticence about extending it beyond 10 years old. And so I think that's, I mean, it seems apparent from the comments that were made that a lot of the public, as well as the industry, have concerns about older vehicles and whether it should be extended there or not. And as you say, the evidence is that as vehicles age, certainly in terms of their MOTs, the fail rate increases. So there is that evidence there as well. So yes, it's certainly something that would need to be very carefully considered.
The chairman spoke of the need to, almost separate the MOT test and regular servicing. Certainly during the period of COVID, I picked up from a couple of garages issues that one particular mechanic who specialised in MOT, his work just completely dried up, so people were not servicing their vehicles. And then from another garage that they had for the first time ever been experiencing engine failures because of blocked oil fillers, where people had driven ridiculous amount of miles without doing basic maintenance. So, just a word of warning, I suspect there's a danger of the divorce not occurring. One other issue that I picked up in the survey of comments was the potential for insurance to increase because of increased risk. So, to what extent may there be unintended consequences?
So that is one that would absolutely need to be taken out, and the responses from the two insurance bodies highlighted that as a potential issue. Now, again, as Adrian said, to a large extent, those representative bodies didn't want to do an awful lot of work on the potential for modelling out particular models where we hadn't firmed up what the proposal was. So what the potential impact of that would depend on exactly what was proposed as the model, but certainly they have flagged that up as as an issue, and that is clearly part of the response, and it will absolutely need to be part of the consideration as you go forward. And as the Minister said, she has asked officials to engage with key stakeholders, including the insurance industry, who flagged this issue up, and we will engage with to sort of look at more detail at that. So yes, that's a...
The statistics finally then, Mr. Chairman, the statistics are showing that there's a lower risk in newer vehicles of defects occurring that are spotted at the MOTs, and that's not unsurprising. So my question comes to, given the huge backlogs that there are and difficulty in booking a test, and the backlogs are there as a result of reduced testing during COVID, why can the small step of issuing some exemptions with newer vehicles be granted to deal with that? What is the problem facing most people? Why cannot that not be granted today instead of waiting for new legislation?
So that probably, I think that probably falls out with this particular briefing.
Okay, who should I ask that question to then?
We normally ask that to DVA.
I mean, what legislation is stopping this route being used to solve the immediate problem that all drivers face?
I wouldn't be able to give you a comprehensive answer to that.
Can someone come back and give us what bit legislation is stopping this obvious route?
I think that's a fair point.
We would need to follow up on that, Chair. I don't have an answer to that. That would do justice to the question.
Okay, you happy, Roy?
Yep.
Well, you're not happy, but happy to proceed. No, that's certainly something that the committee want to tease out regarding what legislatively is preventing that to happen. I would suspect nothing, but I think it would be nice to have it confirmed. But thank you. We now go to Cathal Boylan, please.
Thank you, Chair. And once again, Chris, thanks very much. And Adrian, just on the 422, not the 442. On the 422, obviously there's 13, I think there's 13 or 14 countries there. I mean, clearly we can learn from what they've done in terms of all the questions have been raised already. But this is about a vehicle being roadworthy, ultimately on driver responsibility. So clearly they have, I know we haven't looked at it because there was a call for evidence, and I mean it's been encouraged in one way or another, and obviously you'd have to develop a proper consultation, because education would be the key as part of the consultation in getting the message across. But just early indications in terms of the 422 that you've maybe looked into, and even as part of this process, could you expand a wee bit on that, please?
Well, I mean, I think what has been said is key in terms of the psyche of people, really, and I mean, I think it is pretty much ingrained that service equals MOT, and I think that's what a lot of the bodies have been pointing to, and the police and NIPSA and the insurance bodies in particular, are saying that you can continually hear some version of, we need the MOT prompt, and if you don't have an MOT prompt, people won't service their vehicles. So, or they'll try and skimp, or they'll try and save money and leave it until, they do have to. So I think that is, education would be very much necessary to try and change that view in people, and to get them to better accept the responsibility, their responsibility for making sure their car is roadworthy, as you say. So yeah, very much so. And the other thing that went along with that was that was highlighted was enforcement, and that people need to be educated, and while they're being educated, if we did go to Biennial, there would need to be a greater amount of enforcement to demonstrate to people that they do need to take action.
Oh no, I agree with you, and it's it's unusual there because Mr. Beggs has raised the point about cars being driven. I mean, cars were supposed to be off the road during COVID, not doing extra journeys. But I mean, it's a question on getting the education right, because if we brought through a consultation paper, all those things would need to be ironed out in terms of responsibility, because there's laws already there to stop you in terms of lighting tires and all those things anyway. And you're right, maybe it is a case of increased enforcement now, but that'll be up for discussion.
Yes. The police have, in that context, have concerns about their resources, obviously.
Just in terms of the test fees, would there be an increase? If it was a ban?
So that definitely would need to be worked out in part of the that would completely depend on the models.
I would imagine so. I'd just let it throw it out there. I mean, I take it that
It would depend. The sort of obviously that I'd prefer Jeremy was answering this question than I did about issues. But to be fair, this is a policy. It is a consequence of the policy. So DVA needs to be self-funding. So I mean, all of that would absolutely need to be looked at. So too early to say, but it would need to be considered. So and clarity would need to be provided on that as part of the as part of the development and consultation.
No, appreciate that. And I'm sure, like I said, you go back to some of those countries who've got 422, say, if that's the way you want to go. They would, because I understand the ILGA issue and all those things associated. It's a complicated process.
Yeah.
Whether you're backing up with stats or not, it's still, I mean, it would be a broad consultation, so just on those, I'm happy enough for those answers, but
Okay.
we'll see how the process goes.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Andrew Muir.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks for covering this. Just a couple of things. The police responded to the consultation and expressed concerns and objections in relation to a number of areas. And one of the ones here was the police stated recent police observations are that a greater proportion of vehicles that we have encountered during the last 18 months have been carrying defects. Many more tyres worn to extreme levels that would have been common pre-pandemic. The views of mechanics, tyre fitters and auto spare suppliers would seem to support the view that many drivers are postponing servicing and purchase of replacement parts. They also state police cannot conceive that a move to biannual testing could be regarded as anything but a dilution of vehicle safety standards. It's been interesting to know your comment about that, because the police, the people out on the ground, sort of seeing this.
I mean, I did draw attention to that as part of the introduction.
Yes.
So it's just one of those issues that we're going to need to see what the. I think it would go hand in hand with the potential for an education piece. I mean, it would appear that is indicating that people are not attending to the maintenance of the vehicle in the way that is what that is indicating. And if that is the case, then that is something that would need to be addressed as a potential. So it is a piece of evidence that would need to say, well, look, that means you need to look at.
Yeah,
So
I think it's important to engage more with the police around that, because these are the people on the ground seeing this. The other one's just around, obviously this will have an impact upon jobs, and what engagement has occurred with trade unions in relation to this.
So the trade union have been made aware of this, and we have also been engaging with Department for Finance as well on that. So those issues are very conscious of the fact that those need done, and those engagements are. But again, at this point, as we move through development of a firmed up proposal, because the reality is the potential impact it would have would very dramatically depend on what proposal you went down, and there are other developments to do with testing. So absolutely they're signed on this and will be key engagement, but the outworkings of it are actually far from clear until you start to firm up as to what.
See, as part of this, was there meetings or was it just an opportunity for them to send in their submissions? Because it's important that there's a collaborative approach with the trade unions.
So during the call for evidence, they sent in their meeting, because that's during a call for evidence, we're not at the stage of putting a formal proposal to the trade union side. So they were cited on it, and then they were aware that this has been released into the public domain. Had discussions about that, and they will absolutely be key partners. In the minister's instruction to officials to engage with key stakeholders, she made absolutely explicitly that NIPSA and staff, trade union side and staff, were key stakeholders who had to be engaged with. She's explicitly stated that as we move into firming up a development process for consultation.
Yeah. We're also conscious of the impact upon the motor industry as well. There's people employed in that industry, so I think it's important that engagement occurs, because it's road safety and also the jobs of people that are important.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Andrew. Go to Patrick, please, to Larkin.
Thanks. So just a wee bit more clarification really around the consultation. I suppose the points that I wanted to raise were, firstly, how long it'll run for, and secondly then, how will you reach out to as many people as possible to make sure that there's maximum engagement?
So, this is a future consultation for beyond the end of this mandate. Yeah, the consultation would need to run for the standard period. So there would be an equality impact assessment which needs to go for 12 weeks. A standard consultation needs to go for a minimum of 8 weeks. So it would be for whatever minister was in place. So those would be the minimums, and then it would be for whatever minister was in place at the time to see if they wanted to. Sometimes ministers say we'll do both for 12. Sometimes they'll do 8 and 12. So that's a decision for a future minister. But those minimum standards would apply. If that's.
And then just around the engagement as well, that obviously will come onto the future. But
well, one of the things that and ministers already set out those key people that she needs to engage with: NIPSA and staff, PSNI, industry, and insurers. So. Plus, as we've gone through this process, we now have a lot of people who are interested. So, in going out with firm proposals, that will be very much something that will be highlighted as much as possible. Plus, we will specifically target those interest groups, who have already expressed an interest to us. Those will be explicitly engaged as part of the process, as part of the policy development process, before we even get to a consultation, and then they will be, formally alerted and involved in part of that engagement. So they were involved all the way up to and including any formal engagement.
But I suppose it would be good to see something specifically to target people who don't have a vested interest, to try and get a wider pool of opinion on it, and I suppose see that impact, because as has already been mentioned at the start, there is that people have their opinions made up and are going to look after their own interests, and of course that's going to be the case in any consultation, but I think that particularly for this one, it'd be good to get that wider. Just on this, my last point, and it has been kind of raised slightly already, but it was to see what consideration you've given to the link between frequency and mileage. Just, I suppose, to explain that, if a car has been going for 5 years at 70,000 miles, then you could have a car going at 4 years for 170,000 miles. And I suppose what strategy is going to be put in place to make sure that all those vehicles are roadworthy and that they're tested? Is there any link that you're going to do between frequency and mileage?
We'd probably need to look at that as we start to develop the. I don't know straight off. I'd need to take that question away, but I think it's a very good point to look at. Absolutely.
Okay. And if you didn't mind coming back with the detail, what do us with that as well?
So on that, it's one that we would. I'm just thinking what I can come back with, and hopefully I'll have to have a look to see what I can come back with, because I'm not sure what the reason why I'm hesitating is because I'm thinking through. I'm not sure what is available on recording of the length of miles, against age. I just don't know if that information's available. So that's why I'm sort of hesitating. I just don't think it's a very good. It is obviously. I don't know if the information's available, but we can certainly take that away and have a look. It would be my commitment to you.
That's perfect. Thanks very much for that.
Okay, thank you. And just finally from myself, in relation to the evidence regarding the the other European countries and what way in which they perform, whether it's 4-2-2 or 5-3-2 or whatever it may be, depending on country. Do we have evidence of who actually performs the test in those jurisdictions? Because obviously, again, the committee had raised with them, for example, in England, that it's carried out by local garages, etc. Now, I'm not expressing an opinion on this, and I actually think this is one of those very unique pieces of consultation whereby I genuinely sense among members we just want to know the exact evidence to do the best thing in relation, but there's no predisposed mindsets as to what is the road forward on this. Is there any evidence regarding how those tests, or who carries out those tests?
Adrian, have you any?
Well, I don't have a huge amount of insight. I mean, I'd certainly accept that's the sort of detail that we need to go into for the consultation. But I believe there's a mix across Europe, you know, where some people have sort of national bodies that do it, and some follow the GB model where there's garages. So I think there is a mix, but we would need to drill down into that.
No problem. I don't expect you to have it offhand, but I think it would be an important consideration so the committee can get a wholesome view as to different country models and also how different operators that are carrying out the test, and how does that have an impact on the percentage of unroadworthy vehicles. So just it's something to bear in mind. Cathal Boylan?
Yeah, Chair, just because you raised an interesting point, because in asking questions about the mileage and the question who carries it, I mean, the service record comes into play then. You know what I mean? I mean, I don't want to complicate it. All I'm saying is, you know, most companies would have serviced their vehicle. So it could be, you know, and it's just something we need to think about right across the board. But it's just that, as you mentioned it, you know.
I think that could be an interesting interplay. Could be an interesting interplay with the PSNI as well.
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, as I say, we have service book, we have mileage, we have who carries out the test, who carries out the service. A lot of these things all filter in. It's just the committee's brainstorming this morning, but
it sounds like a PhD proposal.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. Good luck with that. I mean,
well, you don't need one. So
no.
Listen, we'd like to thank you both and Adrian for joining us this morning. It's been a very useful session. Again, the committee would look forward and expect to be fully appraised and kept up to date as to the progress of this in relation to next steps. And again, any evidence or any decision firmly rooted in evidence is certainly our approach as a committee. So thank you very much.
Chairman, members, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members, we will move on to agenda item number 13, which is the CALG report on strengthening committee scrutiny. Members can see the report and the clerk's memo at page 211 and the report itself at 213. Members can advise that CALG is seeking the committee's views on the report. If members have any individual comments, I do know that parties probably will be replying to this, which incorporate us all as party representatives, and I do note that committee clerks have been given the opportunity to feed into the report as well. I have seen in reading through it, so I don't know if you have any comments to add on that from a committee perspective, but certainly as a member of a political party, I'd expect all our parties will be feeding in. And I must declare an interest because I'm a member of the CLG, as a committee chair of this committee. So, I don't know if you have any comments you wish to make. Maybe not.
No, Chair, no.
No, nothing. But I'm just noting you only have 4.
Okay, so we're not there to take a decision.
Oh, sorry, Chair, we have Cara Hunter as well.
Cara's still on.
I've been keeping an eye. We're on the cusp.
Yeah. So we're happy enough. So members happy enough that the parties who are engaged in this will respond as a committee. I don't think it. Well, I don't feel probably placed to give an individual's response to.
Parties do.
Members content with that? Yeah. Okay, members, I'll draw to agenda item number 14, which is our forward work programme, and draw members' attention to that forward programme at 388. I've already suggested, and we had agreement at the start, that we would include at some stage, given that we are getting titled that Drains for Development, would be certainly interesting to see where it could fit in. Members will also know we have our taxi legislation briefing next week. That's going to be a hugely important session for the committee, given their strong feelings, and particularly around funeral directors and wedding car operatives and the plight that they're facing. So I think we can get a lot out of that session. There was a wholesome, united response from this committee when they met with the industry. And now I think it's important that we have that follow-up for answers whenever we meet next week. Members are content with that forward work programme?
Sorry, Chair, would members be content to schedule Drains for Development next week? I think it's
Yep,
the only
I think-
really slot that we
Yeah,
have.
I
that's fine.
think
Yeah.
that would
Yeah,
be
yeah.
If we can.
Yeah, I think that'd be worthwhile that we explore that option, because certainly I think they fit with the theme of what the committee's been trying to achieve. Okay, agenda item number 15, which is any other business. Have members any other items of business they wish to raise, given that we can still make decision? Are members any issue they want to raise with the committee? No. I think, sorry, on Roy's point that he mentioned earlier, absolutely, because I actually think it would be important for us to get about what is the position regards the department legislatively in relation to temporary exemption certificates,
Yeah,
because actually
absolutely.
that's going to feed into next week's
Fair
briefing
enough.
as well. So I think getting that answer to Roy's question would be of paramount interest to the county. Roy, do you want to?
I've listened to what I think the Minister said, that because COVID's over, he no longer has the VARAs, but COVID has still caused the problem.
Of
So
course.
to me, I would wish to know why on earth we're not using this to get rid of the problem.
Yeah, and it also feeds into the other issue that's been facing other industries. Okay, that's it, members. I will now go to item 16, which is date, time, and location of the next meeting. The next meeting will take place at 10 a.m. Wednesday, the 2nd of March 2022 in the Senate Chamber Parliament buildings. And with that, I adjourn the meeting, and thanks, members.
Sure.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.